Hello everyone, and welcome to this exciting video where we will be needle felting a fluffy narwhal. So if you've seen my last recent shorts, I showed a few bits and pieces on my needle felting process. And this being quite a popular creation, I'd like to share how I fully came about making it, so let's get into it. And don't forget to check out more of my YouTube shorts. This is one of my favorite creations to this day. It's really fun and quick to make, and some really cute aspects of it are that it's fluffy, of course. Its spiral horn and fluffy body make it so unique and absolutely precious. I've made this creation about 4 times, I'd say, so by now I think I've perfected this item to a T. So I will do my best in making this tutorial easy to understand and to follow. So let's get started. Firstly, I create a good and supportive base in 2 pieces, the main body and the cute tail that gets attached at the very end of the process. And the eyes are felted in once the base is sturdy enough. And to show you how I've created the base is by taking a good amount of core wool, maybe around a handful, and I roll it up and fold an inch back onto itself. And that'll make one end larger than the other. I suppose it's like making a carrot. One end gets gradually smaller. And once it's felted enough to a point where it's a bit squishy and not too firm, I move on to the smaller end, which is the tail. And I want it to curve a bit, so I place the tail end on my mat, and I use my felting needle to poke at the spot where the curve will be. And as for the little heart-shaped tail, I take a bit of core wool and even it out flat on my felting mat. I fold it in half, then pull small tufts out of each end, and you can see how it forms a heart shape. Then felt around the edges to secure the heart shape, and felt a bit more wool on top if it's too thin. Instead of felting a blue narwhal today, I'm going to use this cotton candy colored wool. It's, I believe, roving tops. It's very pretty, very soft, and this is only 10 grams of wool, which is the same amount I've used to make this blue narwhal. But it's also pretty stiff, which is why it's perfect for this creation. So I pull out only a few tufts of wool. I only want a very small amount to begin with when I start the layering process. And I just even out the strands. And now I'm going to cut in half, or at about maybe an inch. Long strands of wool are not what I want, since it'll end up being cut off. So to keep the scraps at a low minimum, making the tuft of layers short, when I start layering the wool onto the base, only the frayed edges will be cut off, rather than long strands. Although shorter strands are harder to work with, but doing this saves a lot of time and wool as well, even though I do end up using the scraps at the end. These frayed edges of the wool will be cut off and put into a pile and saved for later. So now we're going to move on to the exciting part, and that is making layers. This tuft of wool will be our first layer, and it's important to place it just at the curve on the tail. And just to be clear, I am felting on the underside of the body. To start layering, I take the tuft of wool and lay it flat onto where the layer will start. And I'm just going to be felting it right through the center of the tuft. And then on each side, I felt it again to secure it. And now that is our very first of many layers of wool. And now that I have this first layer, I'm just going to trim it to provide a standard height that I want the rest of the layers of wool to be around the whole entire rest of the body, which I've cut to about half an inch. And moving on, I'm just going to start doing the same thing for the rest of the following tufts of wool. And I will gradually use a bit more wool as I work up the base. Laying the next cut piece of wool and following the same routine and direction of the last. Again, felting through the center and then on both sides, and finishing with cutting off the excess wool. And for a quick way to save me time, I like to gather a bunch of these pre-cut pieces of wool so that I can speed up the process of layering. And you'll also see me using an eyebrow brush, which is very useful for creating a natural look, as well as brush out any loose and unfelted fibers. After felting in these 3 starting layers, it sets a base for the layers to follow. However, the following layers won't follow the same straight line or go in a vertical or horizontal way. Instead, I'm going to felt layers in kind of random directions, going horizontal, vertical, and diagonal, which this method is kind of confusing, but it's really fun. This method of layering that I have created creates a scruffy and uneven look. And it's how I will cover the entire body of the narwhal. It's easiest to start at the center and then work outwards. As you can see, after felting this horizontal piece, it created a 90-degree angle on both the left and the right side. And this is where I start felting in diagonal pieces of wool. And felting diagonal, I go from point A to B. And I've kind of created a triangle shape. So a quick and simple way to describe this process is I'm basically just felting triangle layouts throughout the whole base. And I just continue this process while rotating the body throughout the whole base. And I don't always felt layers to make triangles, but I also follow the rule of not having 2 of the same angles felted next to each other. For example, 2 vertical layers beside each other. I also like to make the layers quite compact, but sometimes there is going to be small blank spots here and there, but they aren't noticeable a lot of the time. And if they are, it's a simple fix. I just take a small tuft of wool and fill it in. And as you can see, I always work on felting layers on the underside first, and then I move around to felting on the top side. So meaning the bottom side will always be way more ahead in layers than the top side. I also wanted to mention a quick backstory of why I created this item in the first place, because I'm sure a lot of you may or may not be wondering why I'm making a narwhal fluffy in the first place. And the answer to that is ever since I learned to needle felt, everything I've always made, I made it extremely fluffy, and I'm talking everything, including normally unfluffy animals like snakes. I believe I've found my peak style and makes everything toy-like and fluffy, and I love it, and I hope you all do too. So I hope we can continue this journey and make more fluffy animals on this channel together. And if you'd like to see any of the creations I've made in the past, please comment down below and I'd love to show you all, as well as if you have any ideas on what I should needle felt next. And I'm so sorry to ramble, so let's get back to it. Once I start getting close to the top of the head, I make note of where the spiral horn is going to be placed and make sure I leave a space and work around that area. And this very well may be my favorite part of the process because I get to have a break from felting layers upon layers and layers. And I get to use this lovely colorful wool with a mix of colors together. So I create the horn by very simply rolling a good amount of wool into a cone shape, kind of like what we did with the body, with one end being larger than the other. And the colors being unmixed inside this wool makes a perfect spiral, perfectly resembling a unicorn horn. And I'll just carefully felt around it without mixing the colors inside. And I really quickly wanted to show a different but a bit more advanced way to create a spiral horn that I've used for another one of my projects, the unicorn fox. And this way is really cool because it does look way more detailed. So I basically just twist the wool until it starts curling on itself. I then fold it in half so both sides curl together. And then I just take my felting needle and felt between the swirls, and then I felt the swirls themselves to keep its shape. Once the horn is created, I felt from around the base of the horn and secure it into the top of the head from all angles, and I'm sure to check that it's also centered and in the middle of the head. And now I'm able to continue felting layers from where I left off. And of course, it is turning out so cute, which is a relief because you can never truly tell how a piece is going to turn out at the beginning. And this leads us to our last and final step of creating a narwhal, creating a fluffy tail. And this is the part we've been waiting for, to use our scraps. I like to use all the scraps that I had once cut and brushed off and were pushed to the side in a pile. Taking the heart-shaped tail and laying it flat onto my felting mat, and I'm just going to pile the wool scraps on top of it and felt it on. And I'll felt around the edges first to make sure there's no core wool showing, and also because there's a ton of wool scraps here and I'm sure to use it all up. And then I'll just go ahead and repeat the process on the other side with the wool scraps. And I know it looks a bit too scruffy right now with the felted scraps, so to tidy it up a bit, I'm going to be taking a bit of our wool and I'm going to do more layers on the tail. But these layers will be slightly a bit different. Taking the bit of wool, I'm going to felt it around the edge of the heart. And then around half an inch down, I'm going to fold it onto itself and felt it down. But be very careful to not poke yourself. A lot of the time I don't even realize that I'm felting that close to my finger, so continue with caution, or be sure to use your finger protectors. So to describe this way of layering, think of it as folding papers but not fully overlapping. I hope that's a good analogy. When I think of it, it is, so please let me know in the comments. And I'll continue this same layering method a few centimeters down from the first one, and then I'll just brush it out a bit after each felt. And then I'll do the same thing on the other half of the heart. And now the exciting part of getting to see the full narwhal piece together, finally. Attaching the part of core wool that is unfelted with layers, and I attach it to the heart. Once they are fully attached together, I'm going to have to cover it with more layers of pink wool. And here we have this lovely little narwhal. And it is as cute as can be. It's so fluffy, and you can see how the layering of wool has affected how the wool falls, and it looks so scruffy looking. I hope that you all enjoyed this video and that it was helpful in any way possible. I really enjoyed recording the full process of this creation, or at least most of the process. And I know in every video I've forgotten one thing at least, and in this video I forgot how to show how I made the fins, but it's quite simple. I just make 2 flat pink circles and then just fill them into each side of the narwhal, just below the eyes. And I am super happy with how this narwhal turned out. It's so cute. I really can't get over it. I'll probably end up making another one in the next week. But it's also slightly too big that I realized compared to this blue one. I don't think I followed my own steps. And don't forget to comment down below what your favorite part of this video was, maybe your favorite tip, and let me know if you're going to try to make your own fluffy narwhal. Thank you for watching, and follow for more.